The Philadelphia 76ers have won 10 of their last 13. Of course, the turnaround in many ways was that Christmas Day game. Also, 3 Sixers are going to the Rising Stars Challenge. We'll get to that, and also NBA, some NBA news and notes with our 97.3 ESPN.com Sixers insider, Michael Kaskey-Blomain, joining us on the phone line right now. Mike, how's it going?
Josh, I'm doing pretty well, man. How about yourself?
It's going pretty good. So, you look around the Sixers right now. To me, that Christmas Day game was a big turning point because, they were just struggling so much in December. It was more than the turnovers. It was more than the lack of defensive efficiency. It was more than, the losing the leads. It was just, there was almost like a vibe around the team that it was almost like it was fatalistic. Like they almost expected bad things to happen. And after that Christmas Day game, it's like the team has a renewed sense in themselves, and now they've won 10 of the last 13. What do you think about that?
Yeah, Josh, I think that's a great point. Obviously, December was a really tough month for the team after, what was a pretty solid start to the season in October and November, where they showed a lot of the promise. November, they really kind of, came back down to earth. I think there was a few factors. There's injuries that played into it. Obviously, Joel missed, a chunk of games throughout the month. There was other guys in and out of the lineups. But like you said, I think at one point it ultimately kind of got into their heads where, they were accustomed to giving up leads and breaking down the stretch. And I think the Christmas Day game, especially like you pointed to, being a huge nationally televised game against another a rival team in the Eastern Conference is kind of, supposed to be up and coming on the same plane as the Sixers. I think that was just a really good win for the team to kind of, like you said, get their morale and their momentum back. And, ever since then, like you said, they've been basically rolling. They have the second best record in the entire NBA since Christmas Day, behind only the defending champion Golden State Warriors. They're 10-3 over that span, and they've been playing some really good basketball with some wins over some solid, solid teams. So I think, that the team has certainly turned the corner, and I think that Christmas Day game and some of the subsequent games have really helped them get their swag back, if you will.
Christmas Day, I saw something from Embiid that got me excited, and that was I saw that he has the ability to hit that switch, to go into that ultra competitive, ticked off, me against the world kind of mode. And knowing that he has that switch, to me, says a lot. That to me it's more than just the talent and the silliness potential. It's that he does have that place he can go to mentally, and you see it a couple times since that Christmas Day game that he says, give me the ball, I don't care who's guarding me, get out of my way, I am going to take over this game.
Yeah, he definitely has that in him, Josh, and that's a trait that I think you'll notice that, a lot of most of the best players in the league, the real superstar, not just like the all-star caliber players, but the real stars in this league have that, that switch or that drive down the stretch of games, where they want to take over. You look at obviously like a LeBron, a Durant, a Curry, a Westbrook. Those guys all have that where, they could be playing well throughout the course of the game, and you're wondering how much more they could do, and then it gets to a clutch moment, and there just seems to be another step that these guys can take. And I think Joel is really just starting to be able to access that, this season, as he's finally starting to be able to get into a rhythm, play. He played more games already this season than he did all of last season. He's been able to play all the games so far in 2018. I think that's really helped him get his footing under him. Brett Brown has said recently that he's, Joel's probably in the best shape basketball-wise that he's been in since he's been able to be back out on the court for this team. So, I think it's part of the progress that he's been making that really allows him to have that extra drive late in games that maybe we didn't quite see earlier on due to, the restrictions, or if he was, somewhat tired. And I think as he continues to, just get in better shape, get more accustomed to playing and the grind as he has been, I think we'll see more and more, performances like that from him in more situations where, he reaches down deep into the tank and can really put the team on his back to a victory.
Mike, I brought this point up, and I thought this was interesting. When the voting came out for the the All-Star game, it showed that the fans and media voted Embiid a starter, whereas the players voted Porzingis ahead of Embiid. And I think that, people have brought up the way people view the Sixers. Joel Embiid, in some ways, I feel is like a victim. I don't mean victim as like, the criminal sense, but, the social sense of the NBA culture. The NBA is such a hypersensitive, everyone gets offended by everything culture that I think some of these players just don't like Embiid, not because of him as a person or the trash, but just because he gets so much more attention than some of them do. And I think that in some ways, it's still going to take time for him to maybe win certain guys over around the league, just because I think some of them look at him and they just resent how popular he's become.
Absolutely, Josh. That's a great point, and I think that's especially true for other big guys in the NBA. Big guys haven't been getting as much shine recently with the way the league's going. Favoring small ball, pace and space. Guys were, like Steph, James Harden, Russell Westbrook. Those are the guys, other than, of course, LeBron, that have been, really dominating headlines recently. And not big guys. You have big guys, obviously. Joel is beefed with Andre Drummond from the Pistons, Hassan Whiteside from the Heat, and several others. The list goes on. Karl Anthony Towns, he had an Instagram thing with. And I really do think that there is a sense of, among some of his peers, not that, like you said, not that they don't respect his game or even like him as a person, but the fact that, he's still, in some of these guys' eyes, he hasn't played a full season yet. He's obviously still under 82 total games for his career. And, in the second season, he's jumped into kind of the media darling of the league. He's starting in the All-Star game. He's certainly taken a bigger shine than a lot of the other players have. And like I said, especially big guys. So I do think that there's a sense of that, certainly not entitlement on Joel's part, but maybe that he's been kind of prematurely celebrated, I guess you could say, by the national media, where some of these other guys think that, they've been doing this for longer and maybe at a more consistent rate than Joel has so far, and that, they might feel slightly slighted by that. So I do think it'll take, no one can deny his talent in the league. Everyone respects his game. I think that, a couple year or two of him continuing to be himself and be out on the floor, I think we'll see a lot of that, potential jealousy, if you will, erased. But for right now, I do think that there could be, definitely a sense of him kind of walking into some additional attention that some of these other guys wish that they had.
Joining us on the Boardwalk Honda hotline is Michael Kaskey-Blomain, our 97.3 ESPN.com Sixers insider. You can follow him on Twitter at @TheRealMikeKB. That's the real Mike KB. Mike, turning our attention over to Ben Simmons. I hear people sometimes say, well, Ben Simmons shouldn't be Rookie of the Year because he already had a year around the league. And listen, you can't deny the fact that Ben Simmons is a basketball savant. It's more than the passing. It's the high level of basketball IQ this guy has. And I know a lot of people disagree with me about this, and probably you will too. So I'm preparing. I'm warning you ahead of time.
Okay.
I believe Ben Simmons has the chance to actually possibly be better than Joel Embiid, because I think that Simmons, his starting point and his knowledge of basketball is so high that he's still 19, 20 years old. The guy has another 5, 6, 7 years to really reach his peak. People forget when Jason Kidd and Magic Johnson came in the league, they couldn't shoot a lick. LeBron James, he couldn't shoot a three of his life depending on when he came in the league. And guess what? All those guys developed into some of the greatest players of all time. And Ben Simmons, in some ways, is as good, if not better, than those guys in certain aspects of the game when he is a rookie.
Yeah, Josh, I cannot disagree with you there. It's tough to predict who will be better long-term between Ben and Joel, but I'm right there with you in terms of Ben being, a basketball savant. It's, on a nightly basis when I'm down at the Wells Fargo Center, I'm, impressed and or amazed by some of the plays that he's able to make. Like you said, as a guy that's never played in the NBA before, just his feel for where guys are going to be on both ends of the floor. I think his defense has kind of gotten less attention than it really deserves, just because he's been so impressive and different on the offensive end with 5 triple-doubles, his dunking, his vision. But I think defensively he also has the potential to be a really elite defensive player that could switch on and guard basically 1 through 4 seamlessly. I think that's going to be part of his game that can really help to take him to that next level. But, I'm not too concerned about his shooting yet at this point either. I think, like you said, a lot of the guys that he kind of compares to at this point in his career had their own struggles early on. And I think you've already seen Ben show improvement in that area. He's certainly improved from the foul line since that Washington game where they went to the hack-a-Ben strategy and he struggled. He's got in the gym, worked on the free throws. He's shot in those much better. In the game last night, in the flow of action, he pulled up for about a 15-foot jumper in the flow of the game and swished it right through. He looked completely confident. He's taken some turnaround jumpers out of the post recently that he's been hitting. So I really think that it's something he's certainly not as comfortable with that as he is in other areas of his game and taking the ball to the basket and whatnot. But I think he's growing already increasingly comfortable with his shot. And that's basically just the icing on the cake. Like you said, he can really already, as a rookie, do basically everything you would want him to do on a basketball court other than shoot threes on both ends of the floor. So, I've been nothing but, we all knew that Ben was going to be good coming in the NBA. He's been hyped since, a couple of years ago. He was on the cover of Slam magazine out of high school. He's had eyes on him. So we all thought that it was, he was a great pick and he was going to be good. But, at least speaking for myself, he's been more impressive and better already this season than I thought he would be at this early point in his career. And, sky is really, really the limit for Ben Simmons.
This week, 3 Sixers were named to the Rising Stars Challenge. Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, Dario Saric. Now, of course, we all expect Embiid will probably just sit out the game just because he's playing in the All-Star game in and of itself. But this is now 12 players who have all been nominated to the Rising Stars Challenge during the Brett Brown coaching tenure. I look at Brett Brown like this, Mike. I don't know yet. I'm not ready to seal his fate on whether he is the coach of this team long term. But I will say this. He basically was coaching a G League team for about 2.5 years. This is arguably only his second real year as an NBA basketball coach with an NBA team. It's almost like he was at the AAA level with this team for the first couple of years. I don't think that we will really know what Brett Brown is as a coach until next year because this team is still formulating who it is. And you look at what happened in Milwaukee with Jason Kidd. I know a lot of people point to that and say, see, the Bucks fired Jason Kidd, the Sixers need to get rid of Brett Brown. I say that I don't think we really know what Brett Brown is as a coach until we get to the full point of this year and we get into next year.
I agree with you there, Josh. I think that's a good point. This year particularly, it's not tough to judge Brett, but this, as you kind of alluded to, is really the first year. I mean, he had a much better roster last year than he had the previous seasons. He was still dealing with, Joel only played 31 games. Okafor was in and out of the roster. Nerlens was on the roster. There was still a lot of turnover and change last season. I feel like this season right now is really the first full season where he has a roster that's pretty set in stone, pretty solid. There's not a ton of guys coming in and out up to this point. Maybe a move or two will get made at the deadline, but up to this point in the season, his roster has been pretty well set other than injury issues. Joel's been, for the most part, in the lineup. It's not been an in and out thing. The restriction has been gone as far as his minutes. He has been in there. And like you said, there's this other NBA talent, JJ, Amir, TJ has developed into, a reliable player. And I think so this is really the first year that we're seeing Brett have the talent to really contend with other teams on a nightly basis in this league. And sure, there was and will be growing pains earlier on, but by and large, I think the signs that what you've seen from Brett with this team has been, really promising as far as his ability. He has them, in the top 5 or 6. It's fluctuated, but top 5 or 6 in the whole league defensively on the season. They're the top rebounding team in the league, which has, certainly helped them defensively. They play at one of the fastest paces, and they share the ball more than any team other than the Warriors as far as assists goes. I think you're seeing a lot of trends for this team heading in the right direction this season. And, I do agree that you can't tell Brett's fate one way or another until the coming seasons, but I think the foundation that he's putting in this team as far as the culture and the identity and the style of play that they are playing, I think it's setting the groundwork for something really positive going forward. And you mentioned, the 12 players had made the Rising Stars Challenge under Brett's tenure with this team. And I think that's something that kind of gets, overlooked by some of the critics of Brett Brown, is not only how much some of these players have grown, but how much some of these players really respond and appreciate Brett Brown. Like, you mentioned Jason Kidd and the Bucks. Of course, I didn't follow that situation as closely, but, there was some disconnect, I feel, in between the players and the coach and the locker room. None of that exists with this Sixers team. It's a really close-knit group. And of covering this team since Brett Brown has been here, other than Jalil after he was already traded, I haven't heard any player say anything but positive things about Brett Brown and what he's done for his players. And those guys landing in the Rising Stars Challenge is, it's kind of just shows what he does in terms of developing players. That's what he did. In San Antonio, he was really in charge of the player development down there with Tony Parker, Manu, Tim Duncan, Kawhi. A lot of these guys that have become household names developed into what they are with Brett's help, and that was some of the reason that the Sixers were interested in bringing him here to develop their young guys. And, I think he's done it really well. So, we'll see moving forward once the expectations continue to rise as far as competing in the playoffs. But I do think that Brett is showing that he is, for right now, certainly at least the right coach for this team.
He is Michael Kaskey-Blomain, our 97.3 ESPN.com Sixers insider, joining us on the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Mike, I got to hit this break, but I appreciate you taking the time to join me today. And we'll be catching up more as the basketball season is getting more and more into swing with the All-Star break coming up, the trade deadline coming up, as well as the Sixers looking like they're going to maybe not just get an 8 or a 7 seed, but maybe a 6 or a 5 seed. So, Mike, we'll be checking in with you again in the near future.
Sounds good, Josh. Thanks for having me on.